He looked at the 7 tiny newborns in the bassinets and saw a bill he couldn't pay. She looked at them and saw a miracle. He threw the divorce papers onto her hospital bed, the sharp corners grazing her trembling fingers, and laughed as he walked out the door with his mistress. He thought he was escaping a life of poverty. He thought he was leaving a burden behind. But as his expensive Italian shoes clicked down the hallway, he had no idea that the woman he just discarded had just become the most powerful person in the city. He didn't know that while he was worrying about the price of diapers, she had just inherited $1 trillion. He left her to die in the rain, never suspecting that tomorrow he would be begging her for a job. But before we watch this man's world crumble into dust, if you believe that karma never loses an address, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's a simple way to stand with a mother who fought back. And drop a comment below telling me, do you think a man who abandons his children deserves a second chance? Yes or no? Let me know. Now, let's go back to the moment the heart monitor and Elina's heart began to race. The relentless, mechanical pulse of the heart monitor was the only thing anchoring Elina to reality. It repeated its rhythm over and over, a sharp, synthetic echo that cut through the heavy fog clouding her mind. Her body felt as though it had been turned inside out, a raw, throbbing vessel that had just performed a miracle the laws of physics said shouldn't be possible. 7. The number echoed in the aching hollows of her bones. 7 heartbeats. 7 cries that had pierced the sterile, cold air of the delivery room just moments ago. Now the room was quiet, save for the distant, muffled shuffling of nurses and the low hum of machinery keeping her alive. Elina tried to shift on the bed, but a searing pain shot through her lower abdomen, a brutal reminder of the extensive surgery she had just endured. Her skin felt clammy, coated in a layer of cold sweat that the thin hospital gown couldn't absorb. She smelled of antiseptic, iodine, and the metallic tang of blood, the scent of survival. She licked her dry, cracked lips, tasting the salt of her own tears. She had done it. Against every odd, against every doctor who told her to give up, she had brought them all here. The heavy oak door to the private suite swung open with force. It wasn't the soft, hesitant entrance of a nurse coming to check vitals. It was a push of aggression, the hinges groaning under the pressure. Elina's heart fluttered, not with the machine this time, but with a fragile hope. "Jones," she whispered, her voice raspy, like sandpaper scraping against stone. Her throat was parched from hours of screaming. Heavy, deliberate footsteps struck the linoleum floor. The sound was sharp and authoritative, unmistakably the strike of expensive Italian leather dress shoes. A scent drifted toward the bed, overpowering the sterile smell of the hospital. It was a heavy musk, a mix of costly cologne and the stale, clinging odor of cigar smoke. It was a smell Elina associated with Jones's late nights at the office, nights he claimed were spent securing their future. 7, a male voice stated. It wasn't warm. It didn't tremble with awe. It sounded flat and cold, like an accountant reading a tax audit that had gone horribly wrong. The doctor said 7, Elina. 7 living, breathing mouths. Elina forced her heavy eyelids to peel open further. She didn't need to see him to know he was standing at the foot of her bed, maintaining a cruel distance. She could feel the frost radiating off him. "They are beautiful, Jones," Elina breathed out, reaching a trembling hand toward where his voice came from. Her fingers brushed against the cold metal railing of the bed. "The boys, the girls, they made it." A sharp, derisive scoff tore through the air. "It's a litter, Elina. That's what animals have. Litters, not humans." The air in the room seemed to vanish. Elina's hand froze in midair. The cruelty of his words hit her harder than the scalpel had. "Jones, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I did the math," Jones continued, his voice looming closer. She could hear the distinct rustle of stiff paper being pulled from a jacket pocket. It sounded like dry leaves being crushed. Diapers, formula, college tuition times 7, a van instead of a sedan, noise, chaos, mediocrity. That is not the life I signed up for. We wanted a family, Elina pleaded, tears welling up again, hot and stinging against her cool cheeks. We prayed for this. I prayed for a son, maybe a daughter, one heir, not a village, Jones snapped. Then there was another sound, the rapid, sharp tapping of high heels against the floor. Lighter, faster, and more impatient than Jones's stride. A new scent invaded Elina's space, something floral, sickly sweet, like vanilla and jasmine that had been left out in the sun too long. Jones, hurry it up, a woman's voice drawled. It was smooth, high-pitched, and dripping with boredom. The reservation is at 8, and I don't want to smell like a hospital. Elina's breath hitched. Nia, she knew that voice. Nia was Jones's assistant, the one Elina had invited to dinner, the one Elina had thanked for organizing Jones's schedule so he could be home more often. She's here, Elina whispered, the betrayal piercing her chest. She's here because she's the future, Elina, Jones said, his tone devoid of any empathy. Nia understands that a man in my position needs freedom, not a nursery. With a sudden, dismissive motion, a stack of papers was thrown onto Elina's chest. The impact was heavy, the sharp corners digging into her tender skin through the thin gown. Sign them, Jones ordered. I've been generous. I paid the hospital admission fee. But from this moment forward, the bills, the babies, the debt, it's all yours, I'm done. Elina's fingers, trembling uncontrollably, touched the cool surface of the papers. The texture was smooth, high-quality legal bond paper. It felt like a death sentence. You can't, Elina choked out, the sob rising from her belly, pulling painfully at her stitches. Jones, they are hours old, you haven't even heard them cry. I don't want to hear them cry, Elina. That's the point, Jones said. Come on, Nia. Wait, Elina tried to sit up, gasping as pain blinded her for a second. The rhythm of the heart monitor accelerated wildly, mirroring her panic. Jones, please, I can't do this alone. I have nothing. How will I feed them? The footsteps stopped near the door. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. When Jones spoke again, his voice was lower, darker. You should have thought about that before you decided to keep all 7. That's your burden, darling, not mine. The heavy door opened and then slammed shut with a vibration that shook the bed frame. Elina was left in the quiet. The only sound remaining was the frantic, racing beat of her own broken heart echoing from the machine, and the phantom sensation of the heavy papers pressing down on her chest, heavier than the baby's had ever been. She was alone, 7 babies, $0, and a body broken by love. But as Elina lay there, drowning in despair, she didn't know that miles away, in a dusty law office that smelled of old leather and mahogany, a fax machine was beginning to function. A document was printing, a document with her name on it, and a number that Jones couldn't even count to. Karma wasn't just watching, it was preparing to cash a check. The ink on the divorce papers hadn't even dried before the second blow landed. The heavy door to the recovery room opened again, but this time, the footsteps were brisk and devoid of compassion. It was the hospital administrator. She smelled of stale coffee and bureaucratic indifference. She didn't look at Elina's tear-stained face, she looked at the clipboard in her hand. Mrs. Davidson, the woman said, her voice tight, we have a problem with the billing information on file. Elina wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, the movement sending a fresh wave of pain through her surgical incision. My husband, he handles the accounts. Just run the card again. We did, the administrator replied. The transaction was reversed 5 minutes ago. The card has been reported lost or stolen. The account is frozen. The words hung in the air, heavier than the storm clouds gathering outside the window. Frozen, just like Jones's heart. He hadn't just left, he had scorched the earth behind him. He wanted to make sure she didn't just fall, he wanted to make sure she couldn't get back up. I have my own card," Elina stammered, reaching for her purse on the bedside table. Her fingers fumbled with the zipper. She pulled out her debit card, the blue plastic feeling slippery in her sweating palms. "Try this one." The administrator took it. She produced a portable card reader from her pocket. She inserted the card. The silence in the room was suffocating. Then came the sound, a low, flat electronic tone. It was a sound of rejection, a sound that said no. "Insufficient funds," the administrator stated, handing the card back as if it were contaminated. "It seems the joint savings were transferred out this morning as well." Elina felt the blood drain from her face. He took everything. Every dollar they had saved for the nursery, for the formula, for emergencies, it was all gone. "I need you to vacate the private suite immediately," the administrator said, checking her watch. "We are not a charity ward. If you cannot pay, you will have to be discharged. The babies are stable. You can take them." "Take them?" Elina's voice rose, cracking with panic. "I just had surgery. I have 7 infants. It's pouring rain outside. Where am I supposed to go?" "That is not hospital policy to decide," the woman said, turning on her heel. "Security will be here in 20 minutes to escort you." 20 minutes. The next quarter of an hour was a blur of humiliating desperation. Elina, still bent over in pain, packed her meager belongings. She didn't have enough clothes for 7 babies. She wrapped them in the thin, rough hospital blankets. One by one, she placed them into the 2 heavy bassinets the hospital allowed her to borrow only as far as the curb. Gloria, the kind nurse who had been there during the delivery, slipped into the room. She didn't say a word. She simply shoved a large bag into Elina's hands. It crinkled softly. Inside, Elina could feel the texture of diapers, wipes, and several cans of formula. "Go out the back exit," Gloria whispered, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "The press is at the front. Jones probably tipped them off to humiliate you." Elina nodded, unable to speak. She pushed the heavy cart with her 7 children down the long, sterile hallway. The wheels squeaked rhythmically, a high-pitched friction of metal on tile announcing her shame to everyone she passed. When the automatic doors slid open, the world hit her. The heat of the hospital was instantly replaced by a biting, wet wind. The smell of ozone and exhaust fumes filled her lungs. It wasn't just raining, the sky was weeping. Thunder rumbled low in the distance like a hungry beast growling in its throat. Elina stepped onto the curb. The rain soaked through her thin clothes instantly, chilling her to the bone. She stood there, shivering, shielding the babies with her own body as best she could. She raised her hand to hail a taxi. A yellow cab slowed down, tires splashing through a puddle. The driver looked at her, soaked and trembling. Then he looked at the 7 bundles. He looked at the chaos. He didn't even roll down the window. He just accelerated, the engine roaring as he sped away, splashing dirty water onto Elina's shoes. Another car passed, then another. No one stopped. No one wanted a woman with a village of children. Elina looked down at her babies. They were starting to stir. The cold was waking them up. One began to cry, a thin, high-pitched wail that was quickly joined by a second, then a third. Soon, a chorus of 7 tiny, helpless voices rose into the stormy air, crying out for a father who was probably popping champagne in a warm penthouse at that very moment. Elina fell to her knees on the wet concrete. The rough surface scraped against her skin. She wrapped her arms around the bassinets, her tears mixing with the rain. "I'm sorry," she sobbed into the storm. "I'm so sorry." She had hit rock bottom. But as she cried, her hand brushed against the pocket of her soaked coat. Her phone vibrated against her hip. Once, twice. It wasn't Jones. It wasn't the bank. It was a number she didn't recognize, a number with a sterile, international ringtone pattern that continued to buzz against her leg, demanding to be answered. Elina wiped her wet hand on her shirt and pulled the phone out. She didn't know it yet, but the person on the other end of that line held the key to a kingdom that would make Jones's penthouse look like a cardboard box. "Hello," she whispered, her voice broken. "Is this Elina Davidson, granddaughter of Mama Zuri?" a deep, gravelly voice asked. Elina froze. The rain seemed to stop. The cold seemed to vanish. "Yes," she said. "Who is this?" "My name is Mr. Henderson," the voice said. "And I advise you to sit down, Mrs. Davidson. Although, given what I am about to tell you, you might want to stand up tall." "Sit down," Elina laughed, a sound that was half hysteria, half sob. "Mr. Henderson, I am currently kneeling on a sidewalk in the rain with 7 newborns. I don't think I can get any lower." "That is exactly why I am calling, Mrs. Davidson," the voice replied. It was calm, steady, and carried the weight of old money, the kind of voice that never had to shout to be heard. "I represent the blind trust of your great-grandmother, Zuri. You called her Mama Zuri, I believe." Mama Zuri. The name brought a faint, ghostly warmth to Elina's freezing chest. She remembered stories of the stern woman who farmed dust in Texas, a woman everyone said was crazy for holding onto barren land that wouldn't even grow corn. "She passed away 50 years ago," Elina shivered, switching the phone to her other ear as freezing water dripped down her neck. "She had nothing, just dirt." "That dirt," Mr. Henderson corrected gently, sat directly on top of the largest unmined deposit of lithium and rare earth minerals in the Western Hemisphere. Minerals that now power half the world's technology. The thunder rumbled again, but it sounded distant now, muffled by the pounding of blood in Elina's ears. The world seemed to narrow down to the speaker of her phone. "I don't understand," Elina whispered, clutching the wet fabric of her coat. "The trust was specific, Elina. It was a Doomsday Clause. The wealth was to remain locked, compounding interest for decades, until a female descendant was abandoned by her husband in her hour of greatest need. Specifically, immediately after childbirth." Elina felt dizzy. The rain plastered her hair to her face, blinding her, but her mind was seeing something else entirely. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that the conditions of the trust were met 45 minutes ago when Mr. Davidson signed those divorce papers. The trust has unlocked." "How? How much?" Elina asked, her voice barely audible over the hiss of tires on the wet pavement. "We are still finalizing the valuation of the mineral rights and the accumulated investments," Henderson said. He paused, and in that silence, Elina could hear the crisp rustle of papers on his end, a sound of order and precision. "But the liquid assets alone currently sit at approximately $1 trillion. $1 trillion. The words didn't land like a sentence. They landed like a physical blow. It was too big. It was a number for stars, for galaxies, not for a woman who couldn't afford a taxi ride home. You're joking," Elina gasped, her breath hitching. "This is a cruel joke. Jones, did you put him up to this?" "Look up Mrs. Davidson," Henderson said, his voice cutting through her panic. Elina lifted her head. Through the gray curtain of rain, she saw lights. Not the yellow, dim, fading lights of a taxi. These were blinding, crisp, white LED lights cutting through the storm like lasers. Long, sleek vehicle, darker than the night itself, glided to the curb. It moved silently, purring like a large predator. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, the kind of car Elina had only seen in glossy magazines at the dentist's office. The rear door opened before the car even came to a complete stop. A driver in an immaculate black suit stepped out, ignoring the mud that instantly ruined his polished shoes. He snapped open a massive black umbrella and ran towards her. "Mrs. Davidson." The driver asked, his voice respectful, urgent, breathless. "Mr. Henderson sent me. Please let me take the children. The car is heated. We have warm towels." Elina looked at the driver, soaked within seconds but unbothered. Then she looked at the phone in her trembling hand. "Mr. Henderson." "Get in the car, Elina," the lawyer said softly. "The rain is over. Your reign is just beginning." As the driver carefully lifted the first bassinet into the leather-lined warmth of the car, Elina stood up. Her legs were shaking, but not from the cold anymore. She looked back at the hospital window, high up on the 5th floor, the faint light glowing where she knew Jones had left her to rot. 1 trillion, she whispered to the storm. She stepped into the car, and the heavy door thudded shut with a solid, expensive sound, sealing out the noise, the cold, and the old Elina forever. The silence inside the car was absolute. It was the kind of silence that money buys, a vacuum where the chaos of the world simply ceases to exist. The roar of the thunder, the hiss of the rain, the squeak of the hospital trolley, all of it was instantly cut off the moment the heavy door latched shut. Elina sank into the seat. The leather was butter soft beneath her wet clothes, warm and smelling of rich earth and expensive polish. It was a smell so distinct from the antiseptic sting of the hospital that it made her head spin. "There are heated blankets in the compartment to your left, madam," the driver said, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. His voice was gentle, careful. "And there is a thermos of hot bone broth prepared by the chef," Mr. Henderson insisted. Elina's hands, still numb and blue from the cold, fumbled with the latch. She pulled out a thick cashmere blanket. It was softer than anything she had ever touched. She didn't wrap it around herself. She leaned forward and tucked it around the bassinets on the seat opposite her. 7 tiny faces, sleeping peacefully in the climate-controlled air of a car worth more than the house Jones had just kicked them out of. "Where are we going?" Elina asked, her voice sounding small in the vast, plush interior. "Home, madam," the driver replied. "Not the apartment, the estate." The drive took 40 minutes. Elina spent it sipping the hot broth, feeling the warmth spread through her chest, thawing the ice that Jones had planted there. With every swallow, she felt a little less like a victim and a little more like something else. The car slowed down as it approached massive iron gates that looked like they belonged to a castle. They swung open silently. The car rolled up a long, winding driveway lined with ancient oak trees that bowed in the wind. At the top of the hill stood a mansion. It was illuminated by soft, golden lights that made the wet stone glow. The car stopped. The door opened, and there he was. Mr. Henderson stood at the top of the marble stairs. He was an older man, silver-haired, dressed in a suit that looked like it had been tailored in London. He didn't look at Elina with pity, he looked at her with reverence. "Welcome home, Mrs. Davidson," he said, extending a hand to help her out. Elina took it. This is Mama Zuri's." "This is yours, Elina," Henderson corrected. "Every stone, every tree, every ounce of gold in the vault beneath the library." Elina walked into the foyer. It was warm. A fire crackled in a fireplace large enough to stand in. But what caught Elina's eye wasn't the crystal chandelier or the velvet drapes. It was the line of women standing in crisp white uniforms. 7 certified pediatric nurses, Henderson explained, gesturing to the staff. 1 for each child. "A night shift and a day shift. You need to recover, Elina. You need to sleep. They will watch the children." Elina looked at the nurses, then at her babies. For the first time in 24 hours, her shoulders dropped. The crushing weight of survival was lifted. "Thank you," she whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. Not tears of pain, but of relief so profound it felt like floating. "There is one more thing," Henderson said, his tone shifting. He pulled a slim, glass tablet from his jacket pocket. "Before you rest, I need a directive." "A directive?" "Regarding Mr. Jones Davidson." At the sound of his name, the warmth in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Elina stiffened. "What about him?" Henderson tapped the screen and handed it to her. "This is a live feed from the social media account of Miss Nia." Elina looked down. The screen showed a video posted 10 minutes ago. It was loud. Music was thumping. Jones was holding a bottle of champagne, laughing, his arm around Nia. They were in the penthouse. "Free at last," the caption read. New life, no baggage. Elina watched Jones's face. He looked happy. He looked relieved. He looked like a man who had successfully taken out the trash. We can destroy him by morning, Henderson said calmly. I can freeze his assets, evict him from the penthouse, and have him fired before he wakes up. Just say the word. Elina stared at the screen. She watched the man she had loved for 5 years celebrate her destruction. She touched the cold glass. No, she said softly. Henderson raised an eyebrow. No, Elina looked up. Her eyes were dry now. The firelight reflected in them, making them look like pools of molten gold. If we kill him now, he won't know why he died, Elina said. He thinks I am weak. He thinks I am starving in the rain. Let him think that. Let him spend money he doesn't have. Let him climb higher and higher. She handed the tablet back. I want him to feel safe, Mr. Henderson. I want him to think he won, and when he reaches the very top, that is when I will let him know who owns the ladder. Henderson smiled. It was a sharp, wolf-like smile. As you wish, Madam Chairwoman, as you wish. 1 week later, the sun rose over 2 very different worlds. In the heart of the city, Jones-Davidson stood in the center of a luxury car dealership. The air smelled of espresso, rubber, and ego. He ran his hand along the sleek, midnight blue hood of a sports car that cost more than his entire annual salary. She's a beauty, isn't she? The salesman purred, spotting the hunger in Jones's eyes. She'll do, Jones said, feigning indifference, though his pulse was racing. He pulled out his wallet. It was a new wallet, filled with new credit cards he had applied for yesterday. I'll take it, and I want the interior customized. White leather. Nia, standing beside him in a dress that was too tight and heels that were too high, squealed with delight. Oh, Jones, you're so bad. What will people say? They'll say we won, Jones grinned. He handed the credit card to the salesman. Run it. He didn't care about the interest rate. He didn't care about the payments. He was free. No screaming babies. No exhausted wife. Just this. Speed. Power. The salesman took the card and walked to the glass office in the back. Jones watched him go, feeling invincible. He tapped his foot on the polished tile floor. Tap, tap, tap. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, in a room lined with books older than the country itself, the silence was profound. Elina sat behind a desk made of dark mahogany. She wasn't wearing hospital scrubs anymore. She was wrapped in a robe of pure silk that felt like water against her skin. Her hair was freshly braided, smelling of lavender oil. Item number 4 on the agenda, Mr. Henderson said, placing a thick document in front of her. The acquisition of First City Bank. Elina picked up a fountain pen. It was heavy, balanced perfectly in her hand. The gold nib glinted in the sunlight streaming through the high windows. This is the bank that holds Mr. Davidson's new loans, Elina asked, her voice calm, devoid of the tremors that used to shake her. It is, Henderson confirmed. Including the auto loan for a sports car that is being processed right now. Elina looked at the paper. She didn't see legal jargon. She saw a leash, a long, invisible leash that she was about to snap around Jones's neck. If I sign this, Elina said softly, I own his debt. You own his debt, his mortgage, and his financial future, Henderson corrected. You can call in the loans whenever you choose. Elina uncapped the pen. The sound was a soft, satisfying click. Back at the dealership, the salesman frowned at his computer screen. He typed something, then he typed it again. He picked up the phone, spoke in a hushed tone, and then nodded. Jones felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. Why was it taking so long? Had they found out about the maxed-out cards? The salesman walked back, his face neutral. Mr. Davidson, is there a problem? Jones asked, his voice a little too loud. No, sir, the salesman smiled, handing the card back. The financing just went through. It was approved by the bank's new ownership group immediately. You're good to go. Jones let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. See, he whispered to Nia, grabbing the keys. Untouchable. In the library, Elina finished her signature. The ink glistened wet and black on the page. Elina Zuri Davidson. Approved, Elina whispered to the empty room. She wasn't just buying a bank. She was buying the right to pull the rug out from under him exactly when he was standing tallest. Let him have the car, Elina said, closing the folder with a soft thud. He'll need something fast when he realizes he has nowhere left to run. 2 days later, Jones strolled into the lobby of Davidson and Halloway with the swagger of a man who owned the place. He tossed his new car keys into the air and caught them with a sharp clack. He whistled a tune as he ignored the receptionist, walked past the security desk without scanning his badge, and headed straight for the elevator. His suit was new, an Italian cut that cost $3,000, paid for with the credit card that Elina now technically owned. But when he reached the top floor, the atmosphere was wrong. Usually, the office hummed with the low, steady buzz of phones and typing. Today, it was frantic. People were huddled in corners, whispering. The smell of stale coffee was overpowered by the sharp, acidic scent of fear. Jones frowned. He walked straight to the office of Mr. Halloway, the senior partner. The door was open. Halloway was packing a box. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he placed a framed photo of his dog into the cardboard. "Leaving early for the Hamptons, sir?" Jones asked, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk. Halloway jumped. He looked at Jones with wild eyes. "Hamptons? I'm clearing out my desk, Jones." "Didn't you check your email?" "I don't check emails before 10, Jones said dismissively. "What happened?" "Hostile takeover," Halloway whispered, the words sounding like a curse. "It happened at dawn. A holding company called Zuri Global bought us out. Cash offer, double market value. They didn't even negotiate." Jones blinked. "So that's good, right? We get a payout." "It's not that simple," Halloway hissed, wiping sweat from his forehead. "They aren't just buying the building, they are restructuring. They fired half the board this morning. Total bloodbath." Jones felt a flicker of unease, but he shoved it down. He was the top earner, he was safe. "Well, they can't fire me, I bring in the accounts." "Actually," Halloway said, pulling a crisp, cream-colored envelope from his desk. "They left this for you, hand-delivered by a courier an hour ago." Jones took the envelope. It was heavy, expensive. He ripped it open. The sound of tearing paper silenced the room. He read the letter. Then he read it again. A slow, wide grin spread across his face. "Bad news?" Halloway asked, pausing his packing. "Bad news," Jones laughed, a loud, barking sound that made heads turn. "Listen to this. Effective immediately, Mr. Jones Davidson is promoted to Senior Vice President of High-Risk Acquisitions. He is granted full signatory power over the company's expansion accounts and is assigned the corner office." Jones looked up, his eyes gleaming with greed. "I didn't get fired, old man. I got promoted. They know talent when they see it." 20 miles away, in the library of the estate, Elina watched the scene unfold on her laptop screen. She had access to the security cameras now. "He took the bait," she said softly. Mr. Henderson stood beside her, pouring tea. "You gave him the high-risk portfolio, madam. You realize that makes him personally liable for any losses the company incurs in that sector if he mismanages the funds." "Will," Elina interrupted, her eyes fixed on Jones's smiling face on the screen. "He's arrogant, he'll overspend, he'll take shortcuts to impress his new invisible bosses." "And when he does?" Henderson asked. Elina closed the laptop with a definitive snap. "When he does, it won't be a corporate error, Mr. Henderson. It will be embezzlement. And I will have the pleasure of watching the police escort him out of that corner office in handcuffs." She took a sip of her tea. It tasted sweet. "Give him the corporate credit card with the $500,000 limit," Elina ordered. "Let him buy Nia everything she wants. The higher he flies, the harder the concrete will feel when he lands." The next 30 days were a blur of excess. The new corner office, once a place of quiet strategy, had been transformed into a playground. The sound of serious business, phones ringing, deals closing, was replaced by the popping of champagne corks and the thumping bass of music that had no place in a corporate boardroom. Jones-Davidson didn't just spend the budget, he attacked it. "I don't like this wall," he said one morning, waving a hand at a structural pillar. "Tear it down, I want a fish tank, a big one, sharks." The contractors hesitated. "Sir, that's a load-bearing wall, and a shark tank, that's $200,000. Jones laughed, pulling out the sleek black corporate card Elina had issued him. He tapped it against the contractor's chest. "Tap, tap. Do I look like I care about the cost? The new owners want bold. Give me bold." Within a week, the sharks were swimming in the lobby, circling endlessly, just like the vultures Jones was attracting. Nia was there every day. She treated the office like her personal lounge. She ordered lunch from 5-star restaurants, billing it as client catering. She hired a personal stylist, billing it as brand consultation. One afternoon, she sat on the edge of Jones's mahogany desk, pouting. "Jonesy," she whined, twirling a strand of her blonde hair. "This office is great, but what about me? You promised to help me launch my fashion line." "Nia's niche, remember?" Jones leaned back in his leather chair, his feet up on the desk. He was drunk on power. He felt untouchable. Every expense report he submitted came back approved within minutes. No questions asked. "Babe, you know I got you," Jones grinned. "How much do you need?" "Just $50,000 for the launch party," Nia said, her eyes wide and innocent. "I want it to be perfect, ice sculptures, a red carpet in this building." Jones didn't even blink. He opened the company transfer portal. Under reason for expenditure, he typed, "Strategic Partnership Textile Division." He clicked send. Whoosh, the money was gone. "Done," Jones said. "Go buy your dress." Nia squealed and kissed him, leaving a smear of red lipstick on his cheek. Jones wiped it off, smiling. He looked out the window at the city below. He felt like a king, but he forgot one thing: kings have subjects, and Jones had abandoned his. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from the court system. A reminder: child support payment overdue 30 days. Jones frowned. He swiped the notification away. "Pathetic," he muttered. "She probably has them on welfare by now." He didn't know that at that exact moment, Elina was not on welfare. She was sitting in the nursery of her estate, rocking one of the babies to sleep. The room smelled of lavender and clean cotton, a sharp contrast to the stale champagne and greed filling Jones's office. Mr. Henderson walked in quietly, holding a tablet. "He just did it," Henderson whispered. Elina looked up, her eyes sharp. "The shark tank?" "Worse," Henderson said, showing her the screen. He just transferred $50,000 of company funds to a shell account owned by Miss Nia. He labeled it as a textile investment. "That is a fraudulent transfer, madam. It is embezzlement, a federal crime." Elina looked at the screen. She saw the transfer confirmation. She saw the time stamp. "He thinks no one is watching," Elina said softly. "He thinks the approval algorithm is just a machine." "It is time to strike," Henderson said, his voice eager. "We have the evidence. We can call the district attorney right now." Elina looked down at the baby in her arms. The child let out a soft sigh, safe and warm. "Not yet," Elina said. "Let them have their party. Let Nia wear her expensive dress. Let Jones give his speech about success." "But why wait?" Elina smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Because, Mr. Henderson, I don't want to arrest him in an empty office. I want to arrest him when the whole world is watching. Let him throw the party. And make sure the press is invited." The night of the party, the lobby of Davidson and Halloway was unrecognizable. It didn't look like a place of business. It looked like a nightclub exploding with wealth. A red carpet, thick and plush, snaked its way from the curb to the elevators. Camera flashes popped like strobe lights, blinding anyone who stepped out of a car. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the underlying, metallic smell of dry ice fog that rolled across the marble floor. Jones stood on a raised platform in the center of the room. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than Elina's old car. Beside him, Nia posed for the photographers, her $50,000 dress shimmering under the lights. It was gold, loud, and entirely inappropriate for a corporate event. "Smile, babe," Jones whispered, swirling a glass of vintage scotch. "They love us." "They love me," Nia corrected, blowing a kiss to a reporter. The music was deafening. A DJ, flown in from Ibiza on the company jet, dropped the bass. It vibrated through the floor, shaking the water in the shark tank behind them. The sharks circled, agitated by the noise, their shadows casting long, predatory shapes over the guests. Jones grabbed the microphone. The feedback squealed, a sharp, piercing shriek that made everyone wince. "Attention," Jones bellowed, his voice booming over the speakers. "Attention, everyone," the music dipped. The crowd turned to look at him. Hundreds of faces. Investors, clients, socialites, all eating the food he bought, all drinking the wine he stole. "They said we couldn't do it," Jones shouted, raising his glass high. "They said this company was old, dust, but look at us now, we are the future, I am the future," the crowd cheered. Nia clapped, her diamond bracelets jingling. "To success," Jones roared. "And to the people who didn't believe in me, eat your heart out." He threw his head back to take a drink, but the liquid never touched his lips. Because at that exact moment, the music didn't just fade, it died, cut, instantly. The silence that followed was heavy. It was a physical weight that pressed down on the room. The only sound left was the hum of the Shark Tank filter and the confused murmurs of the guests. Jones frowned. He tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. "Hey, DJ, what's the boom?" The double doors at the main entrance flew open. They hit the walls with a sound like a cannon blast. A cold wind swept into the room, cutting through the fog. 6 figures marched in. They weren't wearing tuxedos. They were wearing dark blue uniforms. Their boots struck the marble floor with a heavy, rhythmic thud that echoed louder than the music ever had. Clomp, clomp, clomp. At the front was a woman in a sharp gray suit. She wasn't smiling. She held a gold badge in one hand and a warrant in the other. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Guests scrambled back, spilling drinks, terrified of the authority radiating from the group. Jones stood on his platform, his glass frozen halfway to his mouth. "Who invited the strippers?" he joked nervously. No one laughed. The woman walked right up to the stage. She stopped. She looked up at Jones. Her eyes were cold, professional, and devoid of amusement. "Jones Davidson?" she asked. Her voice wasn't amplified, but in the dead silence, it carried to every corner of the room. Jones said, his smile faltering. "Who wants to know?" "Detective Miller, Economic Crimes Division," she said, raising the paper. "You are under arrest." A gasp rippled through the room. It sounded like all the air being sucked out of the building at once. "Arrest," Jones laughed, but it came out as a squeak. "For what? Being too successful?" "For grand larceny, wire fraud, and embezzlement of corporate funds totaling $2 million, Detective Miller recited. She stepped onto the platform. The wood creaked under her boot. "Turn around, hands behind your back," Nia screamed. "You can't do this. Do you know who he is? He runs this company." Actually, a new voice cut through the tension. It came from the elevator bank behind the Shark Tank. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding. Out stepped a figure. She was dressed in black, not a party dress, a power suit. Her hair was pulled back in regal braids crowned with gold. She didn't walk, she glided. Beside her walked Mr. Henderson. Jones squinted against the lights. "Security, get them out," he yelled, pointing at the woman. The woman didn't stop. She walked past the police, past the stunned guests, right up to the stage. She looked at Jones, then she looked at Nia. "He doesn't run this company," Elina said, her voice calm, smooth, and terrifying. "He just works here. Well, he used to work here." Jones's eyes went wide. He dropped his glass. It hit the floor and shattered, crash. Elina. He whispered, "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be broke." Elina smiled. It was the smile of the shark behind him. "And you," she said, gesturing to the police as they snapped the cold metal handcuffs around his wrists, "were supposed to be a father." Click. The sound of the cuffs locking was the loudest thing in the world. The ride to the precinct was a blur of flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Jones sat in the back of the squad car. The hard plastic seat dug into his spine. The cuffs were tight, biting into his wrists every time the car hit a pothole. He wasn't drunk anymore. The adrenaline had burned the alcohol out of his system, leaving only a cold, shaking terror. Beside him in the other seat, Nia wasn't screaming anymore. She was sobbing. A wet, ugly sound. Her gold dress was ruined, ripped at the hem where she had tripped while being dragged out. "Jones," she whimpered. "Fix this. Call your friends. Call the mayor." Jones stared out the window at the passing city. "Shut up, Nia," he whispered. His voice was hoarse. They were separated at the station. The sound of a heavy metal door slamming shut between them was the last time he saw her. He was processed. The shame of the ink on his fingers. The flash of the mugshot camera, flash, blinding him just like the paparazzi had an hour ago. But this time, he wasn't smiling. They threw him into interrogation room B. It was a small box of a room. It smelled of stale cigarette smoke and despair. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed with a maddening, insect-like hum. ZZZZZZT. ZZZZZZT. Jones sat at the metal table, his head in his hands. He waited, 10 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. Finally, the door opened. Creak. Jones shot up. "About time. I want my lawyer. I want bail. Do you know who I—" He stopped. It wasn't a police officer. It wasn't a public defender. It was Mr. Henderson. The older man walked in calmly, carrying a leather briefcase. He set it on the table with a soft thud. He sat down, adjusting his silk tie. "Mr. Henderson," Jones stammered. "Thank God, you're here to represent me. Elina sent you." Henderson looked at Jones over the rim of his glasses. "I am here, Mr. Davidson, but not to represent you. I am here to clarify the terms of your situation." "Situation? It's a misunderstanding," Jones cried, slamming his hand on the table. "I authorized those expenses. I'm the senior vice president." Henderson opened his briefcase. The latches clicked loudly in the small room. Snap, snap. He slid a document across the table. It was the contract Jones had signed without reading. "Clause 4, Section B," Henderson read aloud, his voice dry and precise. "The senior vice president of high-risk acquisitions assumes full personal and criminal liability for any allocation of funds deemed non-essential or fraudulent by the board of directors." Jones stared at the paper. The words swam before his eyes. "Personal liability," Jones whispered. "You spent $2 million of company money on sharks, parties, and a clothing line that doesn't exist," Henderson said. "The board, specifically the chairwoman, has deemed these fraudulent. You owe the company $2 million, Mr. Davidson. Since you cannot pay, the company has pressed charges." "Elina did this," Jones hissed. "She set me up." "She gave you a rope," Henderson corrected. "You tied the knot." "I want to see her," Jones demanded. "Tell her to come here. She owes me. I'm the father of her children." Henderson stood up. He looked down at Jones with a mixture of pity and disgust. "She is busy, Mr. Davidson. She is currently feeding 7 children who will grow up knowing their father chose a shark tank over their nursery." Henderson walked to the door. "Wait," Jones yelled, panic seizing his chest. "What about Nia? She can testify. She can say it was her idea." Henderson paused at the door. He didn't turn around. "Miss Nia has already cut a deal, Mr. Davidson. She gave a full statement 10 minutes ago. She claims you coerced her. She claims she was a victim of your controlling financial manipulation. She's walking free in exchange for her testimony against you." The door opened. "Enjoy the silence, Mr. Davidson." Clang, the door shut, the lock engaged. Jones was alone. The buzz of the light seemed to get louder. ZZZZZZT. He slumped into the chair. He had chased the high life. He had wanted the best of everything. And now, he had the best view in the house of his own destruction. But the worst part wasn't the jail cell. The worst part was knowing that somewhere in a warm, golden mansion, Elina was sleeping soundly, finally free of the dead weight that had been dragging her down. While Jones sat in a concrete box, staring at a wall painted the color of institutional hopelessness, the sun was rising over the Davidson estate. The air smelled different here. It smelled of freshly cut grass, blooming jasmine, and endless possibility. In the solarium, a room made entirely of glass overlooking the sprawling gardens, Elina sat in a plush armchair. She wasn't wearing a power suit today. She was wearing a simple, soft linen dress. But the way she held her head, the way her spine was straight and unyielding, made her look more regal than any queen. Surrounding her were 7 bassinets. 7 pairs of eyes blinked in the morning light. 7 tiny hands grasped at the air. "Are they ready, madam?" Elina looked up. It was Gloria, the former nurse, now the head nanny. She was smiling, holding a silver tray with a single, crisp envelope on it. "Ready for what?" Elina asked, taking the envelope. "The world is waiting," Gloria said, nodding toward the driveway. Elina walked to the glass wall. Down below, beyond the gates, a sea of media vans was parked. Reporters were jostling for position. The story of Jones's arrest had broken at midnight. The story of the mystery trillionaire who took him down had broken at dawn. Now everyone wanted to see her. Elina opened the envelope. It was a birth certificate. The first of 7. She ran her finger over the name. Malik Zuri, not Davidson, Zuri. She had changed their names this morning. They would carry the legacy of the land, not the legacy of the man who left them. "Let them wait a little longer," Elina said, turning back to her children. "My babies need to eat." For the next hour, the house was filled with the soft, chaotic, beautiful sounds of life. The gurgle of milk being swallowed, the soft burps, the coos of contentment. It was the music Jones had called noise. To Elina, it was a symphony. Finally, when all 7 were fed, bathed, and dressed in matching white outfits, Elina stood up. "It is time," she said. She walked out of the front door. She didn't hide. She didn't wear sunglasses. She stood at the top of the stairs, flanked by Mr. Henderson and Gloria. The cameras started clicking. Click, 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 click. It sounded like a swarm of mechanical locusts. A reporter shouted from the gate. Mrs. Davidson, is it true? Did you orchestrate your husband's arrest? Do you really have $1 trillion? Elina didn't shout back. She waited until the noise died down. She waited until they were desperate for her voice. Then she spoke. Her voice was amplified by a microphone Henderson had set up. It was calm, clear, and carried across the estate like a bell. "My name is not Mrs. Davidson," she said. "My name is Elina Zuri, and yes, I have the money, but that is the least interesting thing about me." She gestured behind her where 7 nannies walked out, each holding a baby. The crowd gasped. The cameras zoomed in. "These," Elina said, her voice thickening with emotion, "are the heirs to the Zuri legacy. They are the reason I survived. They are the reason I fought." She looked directly into the lens of the nearest camera, knowing that in a jail cell somewhere, a TV was probably playing this live. "To any woman watching this who feels alone," Elina continued, her eyes burning with intensity. "To any mother who has been told she is a burden, to anyone who has been left behind in the rain, listen to me." She paused. The wind rustled the trees. "Your value does not decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. They can leave you, they can break you, but they can never, ever take your crown unless you let them." She turned to Mr. Henderson. "Open the gates," she ordered. not for them to come in, but for us to go out. We have a company to run." As Elina walked down the stairs, 7 babies in tow, the world didn't just see a rich woman, they saw a force of nature. And Jones, watching on the small, fuzzy screen in the precinct break room, finally understood the true cost of his freedom. He hadn't just lost a wife. He hadn't just lost a fortune. He had lost the only thing that was real, and the silence in his cell was about to get a lot louder. The elevator ride to the top floor of Davidson and Holloway felt different this morning. For 5 years, Elina had only ever come here as the wife. She had come with homemade lunches that Jones would eat in haste while checking his watch. She had come to bring him coffee when he was working late, only to be met with impatient sighs. The building had always smelled of his ambition and her exclusion. But today, the air in the elevator was cool, filtered, and smelled of something new: authority. The doors slid open with a soft, respectful chime. Ding! The lobby, which just last night had been a chaotic nightclub scene of arrests and sharks, was spotless. Red carpet was gone. The smell of stale alcohol had been scrubbed away by industrial cleaners, but the fear was still there. As Elina stepped out, followed closely by Mr. Henderson, the entire floor went silent. Secretaries stopped typing. Junior associates froze mid-step, clutching files to their chests. They knew who she was now. They knew she wasn't just the woman Jones had abandoned, she was the woman who signed their paychecks. Elina didn't look left or right. She walked straight toward the corner office. The office Jones had defiled with his arrogance. Mr. Holloway was waiting outside the door. The former senior partner looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His tie was crooked and he was sweating despite the aggressive air conditioning. Ms. Yuri, Holloway stammered, wringing his hands. "Welcome, we didn't expect you so soon. I've taken the liberty of preparing the transition documents. I assure you I had no idea about Jones's financial irregularities." Elina stopped. She looked at the man who had mentored her husband, the man who had patted Jones on the back when he bought the sports car, the man who had laughed at Jones's jokes about freedom while Elina was in labor. "You knew," Elina said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through his excuses like a laser. I beg your pardon. You knew he was spending company money on personal items before I even bought the firm," Elina stated flatly. "You knew he was having an affair. You knew he left his children. And you did nothing because he was making you money." Holloway paled. "Business is complicated, Ms. Yuri." "No, Mr. Holloway, business is simple. Integrity is complicated for people who don't have any." Elina turned to Henderson. "Is the severance package ready?" Henderson pulled a thin envelope from his jacket. "It is." Elina took it and handed it to Holloway. "This is for you," she said. Holloway opened it, his hands shaking. He looked at the check inside. His eyes bulged. This is generous," Elina finished. "More than you deserve, but I don't want you starving in the street. I am not my husband. Take it and leave, now." Holloway didn't argue. He clutched the envelope and practically ran toward the elevators, the sound of his shoes retreating like a scurrying rat. Elina pushed open the double doors to the corner office. It was exactly as Jones had left it. The leather chair was turned toward the window. The expensive rug was still there. And against the far wall, the massive $200,000 shark tank hummed. The sharks were circling, restless in their glass cage. Elina walked over to the tank. She pressed her hand against the cool glass. A large tiger shark swam past, its dead black eyes staring at her. "Get rid of it," Elina said softly. "The tank, madam?" Henderson asked. "The sharks," Elina corrected. "Donate them to the city aquarium. And the tank, drain it, fill it with soil." Soil. Elina turned to face the room. She looked at the space where Jones had plotted his rise and her fall. "Yes, we are going to plant an indoor garden here, something that produces oxygen, not fear." She walked over to the massive mahogany desk. She ran her fingers along the edge. Then she sat down in the high-backed leather chair. It was big. It was imposing, but as she swiveled it around to look out at the city skyline, the same view Jones had gloated over just hours before, she didn't feel small. She felt like she finally fit. She pressed the intercom button on the desk. "Yes, Missouri," a trembling voice answered from the reception desk. "This is Elina," she said, her voice warm but firm. "Please send out a memo to all staff. There will be a mandatory meeting in 20 minutes, and tell them not to worry. No one else is getting fired today." She released the button. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a second. She could hear the faint, distant sound of a pump starting up as the maintenance crew began to drain the shark tank. The water level began to drop. The artificial ocean was disappearing, making way for solid ground. "The cleaning is done, Mr. Henderson," Elina whispered. "Now the building begins." 3 days later, the sound of the gavel hitting the wood was final. Bang! The courtroom was quiet. It wasn't the kind of quiet found in Elina's library, which was peaceful. This was a heavy, suffocating silence. Jones sat at the defendant's table. He wasn't wearing his expensive Italian suit anymore. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. His hair was messy, his face unshaven. He looked like a ghost of the man who had bought a shark tank. Across the aisle, Elina sat. She didn't look at him, she looked at the judge. "Mr. Davidson," the judge said, peering over her spectacles, "you have pleaded guilty to all charges of embezzlement and fraud." "Yes, Your Honor," Jones mumbled. His voice was small, broken. "Before sentencing, there is the matter of parental rights," the judge continued. She held up a document. Jones looked up. Hope flickered in his dull eyes. "My children, I want to see them. I have a right to see them." "Actually," Mr. Henderson stood up from the table next to Elina. "We have filed a petition for the termination of parental rights based on abandonment, endangerment, and the defendant's inability to provide a stable environment due to his imminent incarceration." Jones stood up, his chains rattling, clink-clank. "You can't do that," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Elina, they are my kids. I made a mistake. Don't take them away." Elina finally turned her head. She looked at him. Her face was calm, her expression unreadable. "You didn't make a mistake, Jones," she said softly. The courtroom was so quiet that everyone heard her. "You made a choice. You chose a car over their formula. You chose a party over their safety. You chose yourself." "I can change," Jones pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "I'll serve my time. I'll get out. I'll be better." "The children need a father," Elina said, "but they don't need a donor who only shows up when he needs something." She turned back to the judge. "Honor, my client is prepared to fully support the children. They have been renamed. They are safe. Mr. Davidson is a stranger to them." The judge looked at Jones, then at Elina. She picked up her pen. "Mr. Davidson, given the severity of your crimes and the clear evidence of abandonment at the hospital, the court finds it in the best interest of the children to terminate your rights immediately." Jones fell back into his chair. He felt like he had been punched in the gut. "No," he whispered. "No." "Sign here, Missouri," the judge said, handing the paper to the bailiff, who brought it to Elina. Elina took the pen. She didn't hesitate, she didn't tremble. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was loud, deliberate, scritch-scratch. It was the sound of a door closing forever. "It is done," the judge said. "Mr. Davidson, you are remanded to custody to await sentencing for your financial crimes. Case closed." Bang, the gavel hit again. 2 officers grabbed Jones by the arms. As they dragged him away, he looked back at Elina. "Elina," he screamed. I'm sorry. Elina didn't look back. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and walked out of the courtroom. Outside, the sun was shining, the air was fresh. Mr. Henderson walked beside her. "Are you okay, madam?" Elina took a deep breath. She felt lighter. The final chain that bound her to the past had just been cut. "I'm fine, Mr. Henderson," she said, a small smile touching her lips. "Actually, I'm better than fine." I have a meeting with the architects for the new community center, and after that, I'm going home to play with my children." "And Mr. Davidson?" Henderson asked. "Who?" Elina asked, stepping into her waiting car. The door closed with a solid, expensive thud, shutting out the world and shutting out the memory of the man who used to be her husband. 6 months later, the world had changed. At least, it had changed for Jones Davidson. The prison laundry room was a hellscape of steam and noise. The air was thick with the smell of cheap detergent and the sour odor of 1,000 unwashed bodies. Giant industrial machines roared and clanked, a symphony of mechanical torture that drowned out any thought. Jones was hunched over a folding table. His hands, once manicured and accustomed to signing million-dollar contracts, were now red, raw, and cracked from the harsh chemicals. He was folding gray jumpsuits. Fold, smooth, stack, fold, smooth, stack. It was endless. It was mindless. It was his life now. "Davidson, move it!" a guard shouted, banging his baton against a metal pipe. Clang, Jones flinched. He picked up his pace, his back aching. He had lost 20 pounds. His hair was thinning. The arrogance that had once fueled him was gone, replaced by a hollow, gnawing emptiness. A buzzer sounded, BZZZZZT. "Break time, 15 minutes." Jones shuffled into the common room. It was a bleak concrete box with a single, scratched television mounted high on the wall, encased in a protective cage. A group of inmates were gathered around it, watching the news. Jones usually ignored the TV. It was just a reminder of the world he couldn't touch. But today, a familiar voice drifted down from the speaker. "Historic day for the city." Jones looked up. On the screen, there was a building. A massive, gleaming structure of glass and steel. It looked like a palace of healing. Camera panned down to a large crowd gathered at the entrance. And there she was. Elina stood at a podium. She looked breathtaking. She wore a dress of deep purple, the color of royalty. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. She glowed with a kind of inner light that wealth alone couldn't buy. "Today," Elina said, her voice clear and strong even through the static of the prison TV, "we open the Zuri Medical Center for Women and Children. This hospital was once a place where I felt my lowest. Today I bought it to ensure no woman ever feels that way again." The crowd cheered. The sound was a roar of approval. "This wing," Elina continued, pointing to the new addition, "is dedicated to the care of high-risk multiple births. It is named the 7 Miracles Wing." The camera cut to a shot of the ribbon cutting. Standing next to Elina were 7 toddlers in matching outfits, holding giant ceremonial scissors with her help. They were laughing. They looked happy, healthy, loved. Jones felt his knees go weak. He stumbled forward, reaching a hand toward the screen. "That's," his voice cracked, "that's them, those are my kids." An inmate next to him, a large man with a scar running down his face, laughed. "Yeah, right, laundry boy, and I'm the King of England, sit down." "No, really," Jones insisted, a desperate edge creeping into his voice. "That's my wife, I used to be married to her, I built that. Well, I was there." On the screen, a reporter shoved a microphone in Elina's face. "Ms. Zuri, you've done all this alone. Is there anyone you'd like to thank? Perhaps a partner?" Jones held his breath. "Say my name," he prayed. "Just acknowledge I exist, please." Elina smiled at the camera. Her eyes seemed to look right through the screen, right into the dingy prison common room, right into Jones's soul. "I'd like to thank the person who taught me my true strength," Elina said. Jones's heart leaped. "I'd like to thank my grandmother, Mama Zuri," Elina finished. "And I'd like to thank my children for showing me that love is the only currency that matters." "What about the father?" the reporter pressed. Elina's smile didn't waver, but her eyes turned steel cold. "There is no father," she said simply. "There was only a donor, and his debt has been paid." She turned and walked into the hospital, the heavy glass doors sliding shut behind her. The screen cut to a commercial for car insurance. The inmate with the scar slapped Jones on the back hard. "Tough break, Davidson. Looks like she erased you." Jones sank onto the metal bench. The sounds of the prison came rushing back, the shouting, the clanking, the buzzing. But for the first time, the loudest sound was the silence inside his own head. He wasn't just in prison. He was in oblivion. He had traded a legacy of love for a few months of luxury, and now he was nothing but a smudge on the history of a woman who had become a queen. "Back to work," the guard yelled. Jones stood up. He walked back to the laundry room. He picked up a gray jumpsuit, fold, smooth, stack. It was all he had left. While Jones sweated in the prison laundry, another casualty of greed was sweating just a few miles away. The Golden Spoon Diner wasn't golden. It was a greasy spoon on the edge of town where the air always smelled of burnt bacon and regret. The fluorescent lights flickered with a headache-inducing rhythm. ZZZZT flick. ZZZZT flick. Nia wiped down table 4 with a rag that was more gray than white. Her feet, once adorned in designer heels, were swollen in cheap, slip-resistant sneakers. Her blonde hair, which used to be professionally blown out 3 times a week, was pulled back in a frizzy ponytail under a hairnet. "Nia, order up. Stop daydreaming." The manager barked from the kitchen window. He was a sweaty man with a stain on his shirt and zero patience. "Coming, Earl," Nia muttered, grabbing a plate of greasy fries. She hated the smell. She hated the noise. But mostly she hated the customers. They weren't the rich venture capitalists she used to flirt with. They were truckers and tired factory workers who didn't care about her vision for a fashion line. She dropped the plate on the table. "Here, you forgot the ketchup," the customer grunted without looking up. Nia rolled her eyes. "Get it yourself." "Excuse me," the customer looked up. "With that attitude, no wonder you're working here." Nia turned away, tears pricking her eyes. She walked to the break area, grabbing a discarded newspaper from the counter. She needed a distraction. Her eyes landed on the front page. "Billionaire philanthropist Elina Zuri opens new hospital wing." The photo showed Elina looking radiant, powerful, and untouchable. And in the corner of the article, there was a smaller, grainy photo. It was a mugshot. Jones Davidson. Former executive sentenced to 10 years. Nia stared at the picture. She remembered the nights in the penthouse, the champagne, the promise that she was trading up. "Hey, isn't that the guy you used to date?" a waitress named Brenda asked, peering over Nia's shoulder while chewing gum. Smack, smack, Nia slammed the paper shut. "I didn't date him, I barely knew him." "Right," Brenda laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "That's why you cried in the walk-in freezer for a week when he got arrested." Nia stood up, throwing the rag on the counter. "I was a model. I was going to be a designer." "Yeah, and I was going to be an astronaut," Brenda said, popping a bubble. "Table 6 needs a refill. Hop to it, princess." Nia looked at the dirty tables. She looked at her chipped nail polish. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window. The glitter was gone. The gold dress was in an evidence locker, and the youth she had used as currency was fading fast under the harsh diner lights. She walked to the coffee pot. The glass handle was hot. "Refill," she whispered to herself. She poured the coffee. It was black, bitter, and cheap, just like her future. Years have a way of blurring together when you live in a cage. 1 year turned into 2, 2 turned into 5. Jones Davidson became a model prisoner, not because he was good, but because he was broken. He kept his head down. He folded the laundry. He ate the tasteless mush they served on plastic trays. But every Sunday, without fail, he performed a ritual. He would sit at the small metal desk in his cell. He would take out a piece of lined paper and a dull pencil. And he would write, scritch, scratch, scritch. "Dear Elina, I saw a picture of the boys in the newspaper yesterday. They are getting so big. Malik looks just like your father. I remember you telling me about him. I'm sorry. I say it every day to the walls, but I need to say it to you. I was a fool. I was blind. I chased a reflection and lost the diamond. Please, let me know they are okay, just one word. Please, yours, Jones. He would fold the letter carefully. He would lick the envelope, the taste of cheap glue bitter on his tongue. He would address it to the estate. And then he would wait. He waited for a letter back, a visit, a photo, anything, but the mail call came and went. Thump, thump, names were called. Letters were passed through bars, but never Davidson. Jones didn't know what happened to his letters. He imagined Elina reading them and burning them, or tearing them up in a rage, but the truth was far colder. In the west wing of the Zuri estate, there was a small, dusty room that used to be a pantry. It was now used for storage. On a high shelf, tucked away in the shadows, sat a cardboard box. It was taped shut. On the side, written in Mr. Henderson's neat cursive, were the words, "Correctional Facility Correspondence Unopened." Inside that box were hundreds of letters. 5 years of apologies. 5 years of begging. 5 years of a man pouring his soul onto paper. Elina never burned them, she never tore them up, she simply never touched them. She didn't hate Jones anymore. Hate requires energy. Hate requires passion. To Elina, Jones Davidson wasn't a villain to be destroyed. He was simply a stranger who lived in a box on a shelf. One afternoon, Malik, now a curious 5-year-old, wandered into the storage room. He found the box. He reached up on his tiptoes and touched the cardboard. "Mommy," he called out. "What's in this box?" Elina walked in. She saw the box. She didn't flinch. "Just some old paperwork, my love," she said, gently guiding his hand away. "Nothing important, nothing that belongs to us." "Can we throw it away?" Malik asked. Elina looked at the box one last time. It contained the entire remaining life of Jones Davidson. "No," she said softly. "We'll keep it there. It reminds us of where we came from. And why we never go back." She turned off the light. Click. The room went dark, leaving the letters in the silence they deserved. 10 years, a decade can change the geography of a map. It can turn a small sapling into a sturdy oak, and it can turn a struggling single mother into a global icon. The Zuri estate was no longer just a home, it was a sanctuary. The gardens had expanded, filled with rare flowers from every continent. The driveway was often filled with the cars of diplomats, tech moguls, and leaders who came to seek Elina's counsel. But the heart of the estate was not in the boardrooms or the gala halls. It was in the backyard, where 7 10-year-olds were currently creating chaos. "Pass it to me, pass it." A soccer ball whizzed through the air. Thwack, it hit the net. Elina stood on the terrace, sipping her morning tea. She watched them. Malik, tall and serious. Zara, the artist, sketching in the grass. Leo, the loud one, celebrating his goal. "They have your energy," a voice said beside her. It was Mr. Henderson. He moved slower now, leaning on a cane with a silver handle, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "And they have my father's stubbornness," Elina laughed. The sound was rich and easy. The jagged edges of her pain had been smoothed down by years of peace. Malik asked about him again, Henderson said quietly. Elina's smile faded slightly. "About Jones. He found an old article online." "Oh, where are they now? Peace about the embezzlement scandal. He knows he is in prison." Elina sighed. She set her cup down on the stone railing. The china made a delicate clink. "I knew this day would come," she said. "I never lied to them, Mr. Henderson. I just omitted the cruelty." "He is scheduled for release next week," Henderson said. The words hung in the warm air like a sudden frost. Elina looked out at her children. They were running, laughing, safe in the world she had built. A world made of iron will and unconditional love. "Next week," she repeated. "Does he know?" "He knows he has no rights. The restraining order is permanent, but—" Henderson hesitated. "Desperation makes men do foolish things." Elina turned to face him. 10 years ago, the news of Jones would have terrified her. Today, it was just a detail, a scheduling conflict. "Let him come," Elina said. "If he steps 1 foot near my children, he will learn that I didn't just build a fortune, Mr. Henderson. I built a fortress." She walked back into the house. The sound of her heels on the marble was steady, rhythmic, and unafraid. The heavy metal gate of the state penitentiary slid open with a grinding screech that sounded like a scream. Clank. Jones Davidson stepped out. He stopped. He blinked. The sunlight was blinding. It was too bright. The world was too colorful. After 10 years of gray walls and concrete floors, the green of the trees hurt his eyes. He wasn't the man who had walked in. That man had been arrogant, wearing a $3,000 suit. This man was wearing a donated sweatshirt that was too tight and jeans that were too loose. His hair was gray. His face was lined with deep grooves of regret. He held a clear plastic bag. Inside was a toothbrush, a comb, and $40 in cash. 10 years of life reduced to the contents of a sandwich bag. "Move along, Davidson," the guard at the gate said, not unkindly. "Don't look back." Jones walked to the bus stop. The pavement was hot through the thin soles of his cheap shoes. Cars whizzed by. They were sleek, silent, electric. The world had moved on. He sat on the bench. He didn't have a phone. He didn't have anyone to call even if he did. Nia was gone, vanished into the ether. His old friends, the ones who drank his champagne, had deleted his number a decade ago. A bus pulled up with a hiss of air brakes. Jones climbed on. He dropped his coins into the slot. Clink, clink. He sat by the window. As the bus moved toward the city, he saw it. It was everywhere. A billboard, Zuri Tech powering the future, a skyscraper, the Zuri Tower. A news ticker on a building, Elina Zuri donates another $1 billion to education. She was the sky, she was the pavement, she was the air the city breathed. Jones pressed his hand against the glass. He felt small, microscopic. He got off downtown. He walked to the old office building, Davidson and Halloway. It wasn't there anymore. It had been torn down. In its place stood a park. A beautiful green park with a playground. Children were playing. A plaque by the gate read, "Given to the children of the city by the Zuri family." Jones walked into the park. He sat on a bench. He watched a father push his daughter on a swing. "Higher, Daddy, higher," the girl squealed. Jones closed his eyes. He tried to remember the faces of his own children. He tried to conjure up an image of them as babies, but all he could see were the backs of the police officers as they dragged him away. "I exist," he whispered to the wind. "I was here." But the wind didn't answer. The city didn't care. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled piece of paper the prison counselor had given him. It was the address of a halfway house, a place for men with no names and no futures. He stood up. His knees popped. He looked at the park one last time, the park built on the grave of his ambition. Then he turned and started walking, not toward the Zuri estate, not toward his children, but toward the shadows where he now belonged. He had wanted freedom. Now he had it, and it was the heaviest thing he had ever carried. The storm clouds gathered quickly, turning the midday sky a bruised purple. It was the same kind of storm that had raged 10 years ago, on the day Jones had cast his family into the street. But this time, he was the one without a coat. Jones stood at the bottom of the long driveway leading to the Zuri estate. The rain plastered his cheap sweatshirt to his skin, chilling him to the bone. He shivered, his teeth chattering. Clack, clack, clack. The gate was massive, wrought iron, twisted into shapes of vines and lions. It looked impenetrable. Jones reached out a trembling hand and pressed the intercom button. Buzz, a crackle of static. Then a voice. It wasn't warm, it wasn't welcoming, it was professional, detached security. "State your business." I need to see Elina," Jones stammered, wiping rain from his eyes. "Tell her it's Jones, tell her I'm here." There was a long pause. The only sound was the wind howling through the trees. "Ms. Zuri is not expecting any visitors." "Please," Jones begged, his voice breaking. I just want to see the children. I'm their father. I served my time. I just want to talk." "Wait here." The line clicked dead. Jones waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. The rain fell harder, stinging his face like tiny needles. He wrapped his arms around himself, rocking back and forth. He remembered the warmth of the Rolls-Royce he had once ridden in. He remembered the heat of the fireplace in the penthouse. All ghosts. Then he saw movement. A black umbrella appeared at the top of the hill. It moved slowly, elegantly down the driveway. Beneath it walked a figure. Jones's heart hammered against his ribs. Thump, 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 it was her. Elina stopped 10 feet from the gate. She was flanked by 2 large security guards who held umbrellas over her, keeping her perfectly dry. She wore a white coat that looked like it was made of clouds. She looked ageless, timeless. Jones grabbed the iron bars. The metal was freezing. "Elina," he rasped. "You came." Elina looked at him. Her expression didn't change. There was no anger, there was no pity, there was simply nothing. It was the way one might look at a stranger on the street. "I came to tell you to leave, Jones," she said. Her voice was calm, cutting through the storm. "I have nowhere to go," Jones cried. "I have nothing. Elina, look at me, I'm begging you, just a little help, a loan, a job, anything, for old time's sake." Elina took a step closer, though the gate still separated them. "Old times?" she asked. "Mean the time you left me bleeding in a hospital bed, the time you chose a Shark Tank over your children's milk." "I was stupid," Jones yelled, gripping the bars until his knuckles turned white. "I was arrogant, but I've paid for it. 10 years, Elina, doesn't that count for anything?" "It counts for the state," Elina replied. "But here, in my world, your currency has no value." "They are my children too," Jones shouted, desperation making him reckless. "I have a right to see them, Malik, Leo." "Zara, I know their names." "You know their names because you read them in a newspaper," Elina said coldly. "You don't know them." "Let me speak to them," Jones whispered, sliding down to his knees in the mud. "Just 5 minutes, please, I'll do anything." Elina looked down at the man kneeling in the dirt. He was pathetic, he was small. He was the man she had once thought was her entire world. "You want to see them?" she asked. Jones looked up, hope sparking in his chest. "Yes, yes, please." Elina turned to the guard. "Open the viewing panel." The guard pressed a button. A section of the heavy wall beside the gate turned from opaque to clear glass. Through it, Jones could see the garden. The garden was lush, green, and vibrant, defying the gray storm outside. And there they were, 7 children, 10 years old. They were running under a covered patio, laughing, playing a game of tag. They looked healthy. They looked strong. They looked complete. Jones pressed his face against the cold glass. Breath fogged it up. He wiped it away frantically. "Malik," he shouted, though he knew the glass was soundproof. "It's me, it's Dad." Inside the garden, the children stopped. They looked toward the gate. Jones waved his hands. "It's me, I'm here." Malik, the tallest boy, stepped forward. He looked exactly like Jones had at that age, but with Elina's eyes. He stared at the man in the mud. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He simply watched, with a curiosity one might reserve for an animal in a zoo. Then Malik turned to his siblings. He said something. Jones couldn't hear it, but he saw them shrug. They turned their backs, all 7 of them. They turned away from the man banging on the glass and went back to their game. They didn't hate him. They didn't fear him. They simply didn't care. To them, he was just a shadow in the rain. Jones stopped banging. His hands slid down the glass. They don't know me," he whispered. "They know who you are," Elina said softly from behind the gate. "I told them everything. I told them you were a man who made choices, and today they made theirs." She signaled the guard. The glass turned opaque again. The view of paradise vanished. "Here," Elina said. She reached through the bars and dropped a small, waterproof envelope onto the wet pavement. Jones stared at it. "What is this?" "A bus ticket to the next state," Elina said. "And $5,000. It's enough to start over somewhere else, somewhere far away from here." Jones picked up the envelope. It felt light. "That's it?" he asked, his voice hollow. $5,000, you have $1 trillion. "I am not paying you, Jones," Elina said, turning to walk away. "I am buying your absence." She stopped and looked back one last time. Do not come back. The next time you stand at this gate, it won't be me who meets you. It will be the police, and this time the sentence will be life." She walked up the driveway, disappearing into the mist. The guards followed her. Jones was left alone. He looked at the envelope in his hand. He looked at the closed gate. He looked at the road stretching out behind him. He had wanted to be a king. He had wanted a legacy. Now he stood in the rain, a beggar with $5,000 and a bus ticket, realizing that the richest woman in the world hadn't destroyed him with anger. She had destroyed him with indifference. He turned and began the long walk back to the bus stop. The sound of his cheap shoes squelching in the mud was the only funeral march he would ever get. Squelch, 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 he was free, and he was absolutely, completely forgotten. The storm had passed. The heavy gray clouds that had drenched the beggar at the gate were now breaking apart, revealing a sky painted in deep indigo and violet. The air smelled clean. It smelled of rain-washed earth, blooming night jasmine, and the crisp scent of a new beginning. Elina stood on the terrace of the Zuri estate. She held a cup of tea in her hands, the porcelain warm against her skin. Inside the house, the lights were glowing golden. She could hear the faint, melodic sound of a piano being practiced. Zara was learning her scales. She could hear the rhythmic thud of a ball bouncing. Leah was still full of energy. She could hear the hum of a happy home. Mr. Henderson stepped out onto the terrace. He moved slower these days, but his presence was as steady as the oak trees lining the drive. "The guards report that the bus has departed the station," Henderson said quietly. "He is gone, madam." Elina took a sip of her tea. She looked down the long, empty driveway. There was no ghost there anymore. There was no shadow, just an empty road leading away from her castle. "He was gone a long time ago, Mr. Henderson," Elina said. "Today was just the paperwork." "You were merciful," Henderson noted. $5,000, more than he left you." "I didn't do it for him," Elina replied, turning to look at the lawyer who had become her family. "I did it so that when my children ask, I can tell them I didn't destroy their father. He destroyed himself. I just bought him a ticket to his new reality." She walked to the edge of the balcony. Below her, the garden was drinking in the rain. The flowers were vibrant, standing tall and proud. "They call me the $1 trillion woman," Elina mused. "They write articles about the lithium, the tech stocks, the empire." She turned back to the window, watching her 7 children, her 7 miracles, safe inside the fortress she had built. "But they don't understand," she whispered. "The $1 trillion didn't save me, it just bought the bricks. I saved me. The love for these children saved me." Mr. Henderson smiled. "And perhaps, madam, a little bit of karma helped." Elina laughed softly. "Perhaps." She set her cup down. "Come inside, Mr. Henderson. It's getting cold, and I believe Malik is about to attempt a concerto." Elina Zuri walked back into her home. She closed the glass doors behind her, sealing in the warmth, the love, and the laughter. Outside, the night was quiet. The world kept turning. And somewhere, on a bus headed for nowhere, a man named Jones stared out at the dark, finally understanding that the grass isn't greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. And he had let his garden die to chase a plastic flower. And that is the story of Elina and Jones. What do you think? Did Elina do the right thing by turning her back on him, or was she too harsh? If you were in her shoes with unlimited power and money, would you have saved the man who abandoned you, or would you have let him walk in the rain? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And remember, life has a funny way of returning the energy you put out. Be careful who you step on today, because they might be the ones signing your paycheck or your release papers tomorrow. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share more stories of women who found their strength in the fire. Until next time, keep your head high and your crown straight.